are, mate. Wow, aren't we lucky to have heard that original recording of a man in 1502 putting some change in a tip jar at an artisan tea house. Quite incredible to think that tea houses were around back then and that tip jars were a thing. Quite remarkable. Hello there, and welcome back to the final couplet with me, Theo Cowan. Another week, another sonnet. What's been happening with me this week? Because I know you're desperate to know. You know, this isn't all about Shakespeare. Sometimes allow me to talk about myself. What have I been doing? Well, I'm looking after a cat. A friend's cat. It's a hairless cat. Not a whisker or hair to be found on its body, which is a strange thing to look at, if I'm being honest. But she's very sweet. And that got me thinking, of course, did Shakespeare have a pet? Were pets a big thing back then? I feel like dogs and cats and stuff have been around for ages in terms of humans owning them. Weird concept, really, when you think about it, humans sort of owning these animals and basically dominating them. And I think that's been around for years. You know what? Right now, live on this podcast, well, it's not live, but I'm just going to Google, did Shakespeare have pets? Let's have a look. Did Shakespeare have a dog? It's the first hit. And William Shakespeare mentions the word dog or dogs several hundred times in his works. Wow. Bloody hell. So did he have a dog? Dogs were very popular in Elizabethan times, being kept as pets and guard dogs. But also the strays were so numerous, there were often official city notices put out to control the massive amounts of dogs running around the streets. Now, you don't see that much anymore. In England, anyway. I actually went to Turkey a while ago, and they've got a lot of stray dogs there. So I guess no one really knows if he had a dog or not. But, given the amount he talks about dogs, it wouldn't be that surprising, potentially, in how popular they were during that period. So, there, we've got to the bottom of it. Shakespeare might have had a dog, and that is definitive. Don't ask me about cats. I don't know if he had a cat. And you know what? I'm not going to look that up on Google because we need to just get into the nitty-gritty of Sonnet 65. Let's have a listen, shall we? Since brass nor stone, nor earth, nor boundless sea, but sad mortality o'ersways their power, how with this rage shall beauty hold a plea, whose action is no stronger than a flower? Oh, how shall summer's honey breath hold out against the wrackful siege of battering days, when rocks impregnable are not so stout, nor gates of steel so strong, but time decays? Oh, fearful meditation! Where, alack, shall time's best jewel from time's chest lie hid? Or what strong hand can hold his swift foot back? Or who his spoil or beauty can forbid? Oh, none, unless this miracle have might, that in black ink my love may still shine bright. So there it is, Sonnet 65 in all its glory. I don't know about you, but I'm sort of getting sick to death of this chat of time and people decaying and losing their good looks. I can't even count on my two hands how many times Shakespeare has brought this up in his sonnets. It's almost at the point where you just think, pack it in, Shakespeare, what the hell are you doing? Stop, no one wants to hear this. One poem, sure, great, fantastic. Two, all right, yeah, we get it. 3, you're pushing it, mate. 12? Too many. Too many on the same theme. That's my hot take. But maybe you love these. Maybe for you, you love reading poems about aging and losing your looks and how we can preserve someone's beauty. And by the way, he doesn't bring up any other ideas of how to preserve beauty, does he? He's not saying, well, maybe we could come up with a formula or a serum that can keep people young for longer. No, every time it's the same solution. And what's that solution? Write it down, and that will preserve someone's beauty. Every time. Same every time. You're losing your looks? Guess what? I'll write a poem about it, and then you won't have lost your looks. And actually you'll stay immortal and beautiful forever because people will just keep reading this bit of poetry. Great initial idea. Do you need to say it in 12 different sonnets? That's the question. Anyway, I'm going to stop slanging it off and start breaking it down line by line. Since brass nor stone nor earth nor boundless sea, but sad mortality o'ersways their power. So here he's saying, so since neither brass or stone or earth or the vast expanse of limitless sea is powerful enough to resist mortality, basically. So none of those things can resist mortality, all right? Brass, stone, earth, you got your limitless sea. None of them are powerful enough, baby. And that's the truth of it. Because he talked about that a bit in his last poem, didn't he? About how the land will take over the sea and the sea will take over the land over time. And so even they aren't powerful enough to stop time. How with this rage shall beauty hold a plea, whose action is no stronger than a flower? So how can beauty resist time and this destruction when beauty is no stronger than a flower? Pathetic, really, when you think about it. It's very fragile, is beauty. Oh, how shall summer's honey breath hold out against the wrackful siege of battering days? So here he's saying, how will beauty, which, by the way, is as fragile and delicate as summer's sweet honey breath, hold out against the bloody onslaught of time? And he continues with, when rocks impregnable are not so stout, nor gates of steel so strong, but time decays. So this is all part of the same thought. He's saying, how the hell can fragile beauty hold its own against time when even impregnable rocks and really massive bloody steel gates that are really strong can fall to time's decay? All right, ever heard of rust? Yeah, well, that's what happens to steel gates over time. They rust, all right? And they get weak. And rocks, well, what happens to rocks over time? They also degrade. Think about it. Anyway, so even those tough objects get battered by time. So what is poor old beauty going to do? Oh, fearful meditation! Where, alack, shall time's best jewel from time's chest lie hid? So fearful meditation, he's sort of just exclaiming there. He's going, God, that's a scary thought, isn't it? Ooh, God, I wish I hadn't thought about that, actually. And then he goes on to say, where can I hide time's most precious jewel, aka beauty? Where can I hide that so that time doesn't find it? Or what strong hand can hold his swift foot back? So he's saying, or if the hiding tactic doesn't work, maybe I could find someone whose hand is strong enough to slow down time. That would be great if I could find a really strong person to just slow down time. Fantastic. Then he continues with, or, here's another idea, or who his spoil or beauty can forbid. So this is another idea, of course. Someone who can stand up to time and tell it to stop its destruction of beauty, of your beauty. I think he's really referring to his lover here, isn't he? Of his lover's specific beauty. So someone needs to go up to time and grab time by the scruff of the neck and say, hey, listen here, time. Stop destroying beauty. We all like beautiful people. What are you doing? No one likes people getting old and wrinkly and ugly. No one likes that. So stop it. That's what he wants, to find someone that could do that to time. And now, of course, we're on to the final couplet. Oh, none, unless this miracle have might, that in black ink my love may still shine bright. So here he's saying, no one. I'm not going to find anyone who can do any of those things that I've just mentioned. So that's not going to happen unless I sort of pull off this miracle. That basically in my ink, in my black ink, aka in my writing, you, my love, will still shine bright. So he's saying none of the things that he previously mentioned about finding someone that's strong enough to stop the hand of time, finding someone to stand up to time, that's not going to work. He's not going to find anyone that can do that. But if the miracle that is Shakespeare's writing works out and it's bloody good and people keep reading it, then his lover's beauty will be preserved in his writing, which we've heard Shakespeare say a million times by now. But here he is saying it again in Sonnet 65. He's clearly very, very passionate about the idea of preserving someone's beauty in his writing. Dare I say, slightly arrogant to call your writing a miracle? I don't know. Maybe that's me just being very English, but if I met a writer now and they said, wow, I've actually performed a miracle here and written something that will preserve beauty itself. Well, that's quite an arrogant thing to say, but having said that, I think I would want to take a look at the writing, wouldn't you? If someone bigs up their work that much, you would want to have a little glimpse. So, that is a breakdown of Sonnet 65. Now, I think it's about time to put this to our story. And if you remember, in the last few weeks, Shakespeare has been writing sonnets to time itself. And he's been inviting time down into this pub with the help of an old man who happens to know time. And he's been saying, look, please, time, all right, don't take away my love's beauty. So let's find out how time reacts, of course, to Sonnet 64 and how Sonnet 65 fits into all this. Shakespeare finishes reading Sonnet 64 to time. The pub is still frozen. People mid-jig, mid-drink, mid-urination, and Shakespeare looks around him, waiting for time's response. And suddenly the old man next to him, who introduced him to time, starts shaking, and his eyes roll back into his head as if he is being possessed, and he says, William Shakespeare. And Shakespeare says, oh my God, what's happening? And the old man again says, William Shakespeare. And Shakespeare says, what have you got to tell me, time? What have you got to tell me? And the old man says, it is me, time. And Shakespeare says, yes, I gathered that you are possessing this old man. And time, through the old man, says, clever you are. And actually, it is time that influenced Yoda in Star Wars, apparently. Anyway, Shakespeare says, well, look, what can I do, time? How can I preserve beauty? And time says, the only way to preserve beauty is through your writing. writing. And Shakespeare says, "Oh my God, you're right. My writing is the only thing that can preserve beauty. Wow, thanks, Time." And Time says, "No probs. Any time, mime. And with that, the pub returns to its normal state. People start drinking again. They start cheering again, as if Time hadn't stopped them at all. And the old man returned to his normal self. And Shakespeare grabbed the old man and said, "Hurrah! Thank you so much for introducing me to Time. He's actually a great guy." And the old man says, "Yeah, he's all right. He's all right. He can be a bit annoying when he's drunk, but yeah, on the whole, he's okay. And don't listen to the allegations, all right? Don't." And Shakespeare said, "Sorry, what allegations?" And the old man said, "Oh, no, don't worry about them. I'm just saying, if you do hear anything about Time, it's none of it's true, all right?" And Shakespeare says, "Oh, okay, right. Anyway, I've got to run because I need to write another sonnet to preserve my love's beauty, if that makes sense." And Shakespeare runs out of the pub and into the street before the old man can respond. He skips down the cobbled streets, clippity-clop, until he arrives at his house, where he pens Sonnet 65. And he thinks to himself, this sonnet is so important. It is so important that I explained to Christopher Marlowe about how I'm going to preserve his gorgeous youth and beauty that I must deliver this sonnet myself to Barbados. For Barbados is where Christopher Marlowe currently resides, with, indeed, Shakespeare's cat Mercutio still, who's been a right bastard and stayed out there for way too long. So, without further ado, Shakespeare begins his journey. It's a long journey. He travels by horse, by boat, by cart, by swimming, and indeed running. He travels by all the modes that you could travel by back then, until he ends up on the shores of Barbados. He's sodden to his core as he's swum from Jamaica to Barbados, which is, quite frankly, insane. But Shakespeare was famously a very good swimmer. And he spotted, in the distance on the white sandy beach in Barbados, a beautiful figure, a young, gorgeous Adonis. It was Christopher Marlowe, and he was surrounded by lots of young, gorgeous Adonai, and of course Shakespeare's cat Mercutio. Shakespeare ran along the beach, shouting, "Christopher Marlowe! Christopher Marlowe!" Christopher Marlowe saw Shakespeare's figure running towards him and thought, "Oh, bloody hell, here he is. He's come all the way from London for me. Wow, maybe this guy is pretty serious." Shakespeare eventually reaches him and says, "Christopher Marlowe, oh, how I've missed you." And Christopher Marlowe says, "Ah, William Shakespeare, it's been too long." And Shakespeare says, "Yes, I do hope you've got all of my sonnets and everything, have you?" And Christopher Marlowe says, "Yes, of course I have. They're lovely. They're really nice." And Shakespeare says, Oh, I'm pleased you like them. I do love you. I adore you. You are the one for me." And Christopher Marlowe looks around and says, "Well, yes, I like you too. Yeah, you're all right. Obviously, I don't really know you that well, but yeah, I could maybe grow to like you." And Shakespeare says, "Just give me some time, and you will love me. you will love me." And he looks around at all of the young Adonai that are surrounding Christopher Marlowe and says, they're just your friends, are they?" And Christopher Marlowe says, "Yeah, it's just friends." And Shakespeare says, "Well, lovely to meet you all. Oh, and hello, Mercutio. Nice of you to not come back to London." And Mercutio looks up at him, sips on his margarita, and slowly turns his head away from Shakespeare. Shakespeare leans into him and says, "You ungrateful little shit. I'll talk to you later. But first, Christopher Marlowe, I must read you a sonnet. It is all about how I shall preserve your youthful beauty within my poetry." Christopher Marlowe looks round at his young men and says, "Well, that sounds interesting. Shall we all take a listen?" So, Shakespeare pulls out Sonnet 65 from his back pocket, clears his throat, and reads, Sonnet 65. Since neither brass, nor stone, nor earth, nor the limitless sea is powerful enough to resist mortality, how can beauty resist death when beauty is no stronger than a flower? How will your beauty, which is as delicate as summer's sweet breath, hold out against the battering onslaught of time, when neither impenetrable rocks nor big old gates of steel are strong enough to resist time's decaying power? Bloody hell, that's a scary thought. Where can I hide your beauty, time's most precious jewel, so that time itself can't find it? Or is someone's hand strong enough to slow down time? Or will someone stand up to time and tell it to stop its destruction of your beauty? Oh, none of this will happen, unless I pull off this miracle, that in my black ink, you, my love, will still shine bright. So there we have it. Shakespeare's finally made his way all the way to Barbados, and I'm not sure if Christopher Marlowe is into Shakespeare as much as Shakespeare is into Christopher Marlowe. But we will find out more about that relationship next week, I hope. Until then, bye!